Mistletoe and Murder by Sarah Hamaker. Alec Stratman comes home to Twin Oaks, Virginia, after his Army retirement to contemplate his reentry into civilian life. Instead, he's greeted with the murder of his beloved Great-Aunt Heloise. For Isabella Montoya, the loss of Heloise Stratman Thatcher goes beyond the end of a job. Heloise had encouraged Isabella to follow her dreams and helped fund her studies. Now, accused of her mentor's murder, Isabella is scrambling to prove her innocence. Since his great-aunt had written glowing letters about Isabella, Alec is unwilling to believe the police's suspicion of the former housekeeper. Instead, he works to help her clear her name. Will Isabella and Alec be able to navigate the secrets that threaten to derail their budding romance and uncover the truth about Heloise's death before the killer strikes again? Now an excerpt from Mistletoe and Murder by Sarah Hamaker. Isabella Montoya entered the kitchen, the door swinging shut behind her. She plunked her empty tray on the counter with a clatter. I think if some of the townsfolk weren't still around, those Thatchers would be popping the cork on a bottle of champagne in anticipation of the reading of the will. Don't let them get to you. Sheila Watts pulled a pan of hot grilled cheese and fruit chutney sandwiches from the oven and placed it on a hot pad. I'm trying not to, but you know Miss Heloise was more than my employer. She was like a godmother. I miss her. Isabella wouldn't give the relatives the satisfaction of seeing the hired help crying over the death of the family matriarch, Heloise Stratman Thatcher. Not that she saw any display of grief on the faces of the dozen or so family members who had dutifully trotted to Twin Oaks, Virginia for the memorial service. If only they had shown Miss Heloise such care and consideration during her 93 years on Earth. I think you were the only one who got along with Miss Heloise. Everyone else stayed away because of her sharp tongue. Sheila helped Isabella transfer the sandwiches to a clean serving tray. Isabella handed her best friend a tray of crackers topped with salmon and a dollop of Greek yogurt. She had her moments, but she was a grand old lady. She picked up the tray of sandwiches. Isabella followed Sheila through the swinging door to the largest room in the mansion that dominated the end of what was commonly referred to as Founding Fathers Lane. The Thatchers had been among the first to settle Twin Oaks back at the turn of the 19th century, and patriarch Aaron Thatcher had secured the choicest bit of land to build his sprawling Federalist house with its sweeping views of the Shenandoah Valley and distant Blue Ridge Mountains. Miss Heloise never tired of telling the story of how the Yankees burned that mansion to the ground and destroyed the family's lumber yard during the Civil War, leaving the Thatchers to eke out a living. Then, in the late 1880s, Miss Heloise's great-great-grandfather, Elias Thatcher, regained the family fortune by speculating in railroads. It was Elias who built the current house, a larger replica of the original. Plastering on a smile, Isabella sailed into the parlor, tray held high as she maneuvered to the opposite side of the room from where Sheila offered hors d'oeuvres. Sheila was right about Miss Heloise rubbing people the wrong way. Miss Heloise did have a rather unfortunate way of pointing out the wrongness of a matter with all the finesse of a hammer. The fact that Miss Heloise was right didn't make her manner of delivery more palatable, as Isabella herself had found out when her employer had denounced Isabella's fiancé, Jay, as a two-faced lout who would break your heart, which Jay promptly did when he came back from a deployment to announce he'd married someone else. Mentally shaking away thoughts of Jay's duplicity, Isabella lowered the tray halfway between her shoulder and waist to offer the sandwiches to Titus Simons, a paunchy man with a red-florid face, and Lorna Heames, a rail-thin woman whose tightly permed, shoulder-length hair framed her pointed face. Would you like one? She held out a stack of cocktail napkins with her other hand as the man reached for a sandwich. This place is worth a pretty penny, although who'd want it with all this Christmas greenery and decorations? Titus shoved the entire sandwich in his mouth. Lorna took a napkin, then selected the smallest sandwich on the tray. Good thing, too, since we'll have to divide the proceeds from the sale of the house between 12 of us. Isabella turned to serve other guests, but was blocked by Janet Botham, a middle-aged woman in a black stretch pantsuit that barely contained her generous curves. Lorna nodded to the newcomer. Janet, I haven't seen you since last summer. Janet stepped around Isabella. Oh, right. At the barbecue Titus threw on the 4th of July. Isabella started to sidle away, but Janet stopped her. Hold on there. I want one of those sandwiches. Of course you do. Turning back, Isabella held out the tray and onto her tongue. Janet continued talking. But you're off on the beneficiaries count, Lorna. Lorna frowned. What do you mean? Janet motioned for Isabella to stay put and snagged another hors d'oeuvre. There are 13 heirs. Titus shook his head as Lorna started to speak, but Janet cut them both off. You're forgetting about Alec Stratman. No one's forgetting about the long-lost cousin or nephew or whoever he is. Titus grabbed another sandwich from Isabella's tray. Isabella should circulate among the room before these three ate all the sandwiches off her tray. But curiosity rooted her feet to the carpet at the mention of Alec's name. Miss Heloise had often spoken of her great-nephew, who was only a little older than Isabella's own 27 years. Isabella had dusted his photo, prominently placed in the center of Miss Heloise's dresser, hundreds of times over the 8 years she'd worked here, but had never met Alec in person. Shifting slightly back to station herself against the mantel, she fixed her gaze at the swatches of mistletoe and red ribbons around the top of the pocket doors that led to the dining room and waited to hear more. He likely won't even have heard about the death in time to make it here today. Anyway, his vote won't matter. Lorna waved her hand. The other heirs agree with us on how to handle things. Janet shushed her. There's plenty of time to talk strategy once the will's been read. Isabella took that as her cue to move to another location, holding out the tray to other relatives and the pastor and his wife. All the while, the photographic image of Alec Stratman, his dark brown hair and dancing gray eyes, stayed with her.